At a touch over $32,000 drive away in New South Wales, this Hyundai Venue Elite right here seems like a well-priced package, but it's getting a little long in the tooth and can't match the tech offerings of something such as that Chery Motor 5. So the question today is this Venue right here still a good investment in 2023, or will buyers be better off going with something that has entered the market a little more recently? Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car.
Brought to you by
Budget Direct.
So at almost 4 years old now, this Venue right here is probably due a facelift sometime soon, and Hyundai is aware of this because late last year it actually introduced a facelifted model of the Venue to the Indian market. Now, there's no word on this facelifted Venue coming to Australia anytime soon from Hyundai, but it is worth keeping this in the back of your mind if you're looking at one, because who knows, they might change their mind and introduce it, and you're going to be feeling a little silly if you've just shelled out the same amount of money for the old model. And on the colours front, buyers are going to have to shell out an extra $595 if they want any finish other than Atlas White right here. And on that topic, you might remember when the Venue first launched back in 2019, the hero colour was that wild, bright lime green sort of thing. Unfortunately, that is no longer an option, so it makes me a bit sad. So the Venue is a bit of an anomaly in the modern car industry because under the bonnet sits a 1.6 litre naturally aspirated engine. And yes, I said that, it's naturally aspirated, meaning it doesn't get a turbocharger. So with that in mind, this 4-cylinder mill pumps out 90 kilowatts and 151 newton meters of torque. This is sent exclusively to the front wheels through a 6-speed automatic torque converter transmission. So on the inside, this Venue Elite feels a little low rent for a range-topping model. I say this because there's hard touch plastics all around you on the door cards, on the dash, and while these cloth seats are quite comfortable, the manual adjustment on both sides, which isn't something you'd expect from a car that's called Elite. But in saying that, the interior does hint at a somewhat playful nature because it does get these contrasting white panels around the shifter, around the infotainment system, and on the seat. So it's kind of like retro inspired, which I really like. On the technology front, it's also quite basic. There's an 8-inch infotainment screen that sits up here, and as is the case across new Kia and Hyundai products, this range-topping model, because it has satellite navigation, it misses out on wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto connectivity, so you're going to have to plug your phone in here to get screen mirroring up here. And just like the other ones, on the lower spec models, without satellite navigation, you get wireless connectivity, which still does my head in a bit. There's a digital cluster that sits behind the steering wheel here, and though it is rather basic, it does remind me of the BMW system with the border that goes around the outside like that. Though it's just got single zone climate control, which again is a little low rent, the controls are really nice to use because big dials, big buttons down here, they're not housed at all in the infotainment screen, meaning drivers won't be distracted when they're trying to change the temperature on the move. You get a wireless phone charger in front of the gear selector, there's USB-A and USB-C ports, as well as a 12-volt socket, and I can't leave this interior piece without talking about the fact that it's got a manual handbrake, because I'm sure I could count on both my hands how many new cars are still offered with a good old-fashioned ratcheting handbrake. Though this Venue has quite a small footprint on the outside and is quite a small SUV by small SUV standards, the packaging inside means it's actually quite spacious, and I'm impressed. Like, on the front row, usually space isn't an issue, but there's a serious amount of headroom and legroom, and this goes for the passenger as well. I'm sure it's the same in the back seat, but let's go and check it out now. So it turns out I was wrong. There's actually a remarkably small amount of space back here for rear seat passengers. As you can see, with the driving seat in my driving position, my knees are hard up against it, and there is quite a small amount of toe room down there. Headroom, I mean, I got a little bit of space, but I still feel a little claustrophobic back here. So if you're 6 foot or taller, I would not recommend being stuck back here for a long drive. The basic theme continues with hard plastics on the doors, cloth seats, and because it's only single zone climate control, there aren't vents at all back here, which does feel like a missed opportunity. You do though get a pair of USB-C charge ports. And finally, this range-topping Venue Elite does come with a sunroof, but I'm not going to be calling it panoramic because it literally just sits over the front seat passengers, so I really can't even see it from this point of view, so if you're a backseat passenger, it may as well not be there. So at the back of the Venue, the theme of basic equipment continues because there's no power tailgate, just good old gas struts. And when that opens, there's actually a dual level boot so you can change how deep it is, and that has a maximum space of 355 litres. Amenities are on the slim side back here because you won't find a 12-volt port. There is a luggage hook, which does help, I guess, and beneath the boot, under this flap here, you'll find a Space Saver spare tyre. So as for what it costs to keep this Hyundai Venue Elite on the road, first of all, it takes 91 octane, so that's a bonus already. Secondly, it will match Hyundai's claim of around 6.5 litres per 100k quite comfortably, and in testing we saw it drop lower, so again, that's a bonus. As for servicing, if Venue buyers pay up front for a prepaid service package, it's going to cost $1,575 for 5 years. This is with intervals every 12 months or 15,000 kilometres. And as for a warranty, the Venue is covered by Hyundai Australia's 5-year or unlimited kilometre plan. Over the last 12 months, the median budget direct customer paid $856 to comprehensively insure their new Hyundai Venue. Your premium may vary based on things that insurers take into account, such as your age, driving history, where you live, and whether or not you garage the car. So if I'm honest, I find the way that this Hyundai Venue Elite drives a bit lousy, and that kind of covers most fronts. That naturally aspirated engine is uninspiring on most fronts. It hasn't got a heap of power or torque, and you can feel that in the driving dynamics. It's a bit fizzy, it makes a lot of noise, and not a lot of that noise is transferred into engaging driving dynamics, which just, yeah, again, it feels a bit lousy. This could be remedied by strapping a turbocharger to the side of the engine, which I mean most small SUVs and as a whole most vehicles in the industry now are turbocharged, just because A, it improves efficiency, and B, it's far easier to make power and make driving experiences more engaging. And further to that point, I just think a turbocharger would even out the torque delivery a bit, because right now if it's a curve, I can imagine on a dyno scale gram, whatever they call it, it would go like this, whereas a turbocharger, I can imagine, would make more low-end power and torque, meaning that the delivery would be flatter and not just all at the top end, where once you rev the engine out to that level, it feels like it's overworked and somewhat exasperated. So in terms of the transmission, well, A, I'm glad it's not a CVT. Hyundai chose to go with a torque converter automatic here. But B, this 6-speed unit doesn't argue a good case for torque converters, because like the engine, it's just a bit lousy, and while it does shift, I mean, it'd be a problem if it didn't shift, but there's nothing inspiring about it, and at low speeds it can be a little jerky and feel a bit like a dual clutch in the fact that it's clunky between movements, which doesn't make it feel refined at all. So in the age of small SUVs, it's kind of funny that something like this is still technically considered an SUV, because if I'm honest, the driving dynamics are far more like what you'd expect from a hatchback than an SUV. This is because it feels quite small on the road, but in saying that the cabin feels rather big, but the steering is light, the chassis is tight, and it can change directions quite well, which I mean kind of goes against what I've been saying about the lousy natures of the driving dynamics on the engine transmission front. So with a torsion beam rear end in this car, the ride was never going to be astounding, and surprise, surprise, it's just a little below average. This is not to say that it's uncomfortable or harsh, but sometimes when you hit decent sized bumps, it can be quite noisy, and bashful is the word that comes to mind if I had to describe it in one word. So a big area where this Venue is lacking is on the advanced safety features front, because it's missing a few things that you kind of expect that will come as standard, and on those cheaper options such as that Moto 5 they do. The one at the forefront is the adaptive cruise control system, because this Venue Elite makes do with an old-fashioned regular cruise control system that just, I guess, sets the speed and sets the throttle position and you just kind of go. First of all, that just feels a little redundant in the face of those fantastic adaptive systems that will follow the car in front. And secondly, I've noticed that it's not tuned particularly well with this engine, because if you've got it, say, set at 60 k's an hour and you start to go up a big hill, the cruise control system will kind of go into a panic mode and send the message to the engine that it needs to do all it can possible to get up to speed. This results in a really unrefined experience with the engine whirring up to, well, I don't know, about 5,000–6,000 RPM trying to make up that speed. And again, it just feels like this car is out of its depth, in this case by its own system. But in saying this, it does get a lane keeping function, which is something, but feels a little lackluster in the face of all those other cars that are even sometimes cheaper that get such better systems than this. So as a whole, this Hyundai Venue Elite right here is a little SUV that doesn't take itself too seriously. It's small, it's economical, and it's reasonably priced. Though it's no fault of the Venue itself, it does pale in comparison to something like that Chery Moto 5 with all its extra technology, but on the driving dynamics front, it's night and day. This Venue is a much better car on the road. Interior quality, ride quality, and the lack of advanced safety systems let the Venue down on quite a few fronts and give points to its rivals. But as a whole, the Venue, it's playful and it's good enough for the city hopping duties that it's built for. But those are just my thoughts on the Hyundai Venue Elite. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and while you're down there, be sure to subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.